Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr and also with Kevin Noon. We are live here on a Friday afternoon. Tom, Friday morning. How's it going?
Well, I know what time it is, so I'm ahead of some others on the show already. So that's a good start. Tony, how are you? What time is it where you are?
Well, this could be at any time when anybody is listening, Tom. So I am ever present, and I hope you are as well. Kevin, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. I was here on time. I was here early, but nobody will really know that here as time moves on. But yeah, ready for a little football on Friday. I guess I get to kick it all off with some action. Buffalo, Akron, I believe, but I think all eyes are going to be on that Pac-12 championship game tonight. I have some mountains turning blue in the garage refrigerator, and gonna have some ribs for dinner tonight. It's gonna be a good time.
Same, except for the ribs. You bring up a good point there, but yeah, we got the MAC championship game at.
No, it's not
What?
the MAC championship.
No,
game.
no, no,
It's
not
Buffalo
even.
Akron. Yes, it's Buffalo Akron today, and the MAC championship game is at noon tomorrow.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know why they went away from a Friday game, because I was all ready to drive up to Detroit and go to the MAC championship game tonight, and then now it's Saturday, and now it's like, well, I might still drive up to Detroit, but it's more of a pain in the butt to do it on a Saturday at noon than it is on a Friday night.
Tom, do you think you're?
They should do like on a Tuesday. I mean, let's keep the Maction brand going.
I don't think you're entirely wrong there, Tom. Do your Ohio Bobcats have a shot this week?
They are a 3-point underdog. So, and by several of the advanced analytic systems, they are, they would be favored. But I think the loss of Curtis Rourke is not being properly accounted for in some of those. So, we'll see. Fingers crossed they're as close to being MAC champions as they have been basically at any point since 1968. So, we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Well, Tom, if you want to crown them, then crown them. Crown them.
Closer than anyone else in the state of Ohio to winning a conference championship. So that's something.
That's only because the Big Ten has divisions, and also the MAC has divisions. But as we know, the Big 12 and the Pac-12 do not have divisions, Tom, and stop penalizing Ohio State for that.
Oh, I was thinking it was because Tulane beat Cincinnati last week. No, was that not what you were thinking? Oh, sorry.
So it is a pretty big weekend. Although, we will get into some playoff expansion, I'm assuming, at some point, because one of the arguments against playoff expansion is that it makes all of the other games meaningless. It lessens the importance of games, except like conference championship weekend this week. There are like two games that matter, and it's the Pac-12 championship and it's the Big 12 championship. Every other game is meaningless, and even like the AAC game would be a play-in game this year type of deal, with UCF and Tulane playing for a spot to be in one of those top 6 championship games. But doesn't matter what happens in the SEC championship game. Georgia can lose and they're still going to be top 2, or maybe I guess they could fall all the way to 3 if Michigan wins and TCU wins. The Big Ten championship game doesn't matter. Michigan can lose that and drop all the way to 3 or maybe 4. And so I think this is just one of those arguments for playoffs, because all of these games, or so many of them, would carry so much weight. Like Kansas State would be playing for a spot in the playoffs. Now, does that lessen their regular season? That's an argument that people would make. But I think you'll having more teams, more games mean something by having an expanded playoffs than by eliminating a team like Kansas State or a team like LSU, or all of these teams, eliminating them with weeks to go in the season. I think I'm for expansion, I guess, is what I'm saying here.
Yeah, I think people look at this year's Ohio State Michigan game and say, well, this year's Ohio State Michigan game would have had far lower stakes than it would, under that than it did this year. And yeah, okay, but how often does a game like that actually happen? There are so many more years where 2018, 2019, I mean, there have been a bunch of years when Michigan could have, Michigan didn't make the playoff, but could have made the playoff, and Ohio State may or may not have made the playoff. But yeah, it feels like even, yes, you have the weird, odd outlier kind of seasons like 2006, 2016, 2022, where both teams are in that like top 2, top 4 kind of conversation. But yeah, there are so many more games. The Pac-12 game is kind of meaningless for Utah, other than the fact that they, would get to go to the Rose Bowl, which some people still consider that meaningful, believe it or not. Crazy. Anyway, so you have, but you look at the ACC. The ACC champion is probably still getting in this year. That game means nothing this weekend. So yeah, it is ultimately probably a net positive for the sport, where, people will talk about the fact that it's the greatest regular season in all sports. I'm like, agreed, but it's the greatest regular season in all sports because you're an Ohio State fan, so all the games mean a lot. But for a lot of teams like Penn State has been playing for functionally nothing since Halloween. Well, they would be playing for something, the last month if the playoffs had been expanded. So, there are good things, there are bad things. It is not exactly how I would have chosen to do it, but I don't, this is not the worst thing that has ever happened in the history of the world.
Kevin, where do you stand on the playoffs?
I was not in favor of a 4-team playoff. I'm not really in favor of a 12-team playoff. I guess, get off my lawn, cut your hair, you hippie. I like tradition. I like the controversy of the bowls. I'm a big supporter of the bowls, but we're in the playoff era. So you can either just accept it and roll with it, or you can try to fight it, and you can't fight City Hall, or so I've been told. So I think 12 is kind of a mess. I don't think that's the right number, but you are playing for something down the stretch, even if you're a top team, with the top 4 teams getting a first round bye. Now, we may sit there and after 4 years of data find out that that bye doesn't necessarily help you, because you get out of your routine a little bit longer than everybody else, and you get cold, and it's just not, it's not right. And the other team is coming in with momentum, whoever comes out of, that 5-12 game or whatever you've got. So I think that it doesn't necessarily cheapen the season. I think the biggest concern that a lot of purists have is it might cheapen that last rivalry week that you have in the season. And, we've talked about that at length, and we don't necessarily have to spend a bunch of time on it, but what happens if the way that everything works out is Ohio State plays Michigan the final weekend of the season, and then you play each other in a divisionless Big Ten championship game, and then it's highly unlikely that both teams would be in as 5s or lowers. But what happens if you then turn around and play each other in the first round of the playoffs? I mean, it's as Tom said a couple minutes ago, we're talking about, when do 2-3 games happen in Ohio State history with Michigan where they're both undefeated. That's the exception. When is that scenario going to happen where you could play each other 3 straight games? That would be the exception to the exception. We're really parsing it down at that point. So I don't know. At this point, I'm just ready to watch a little football. I just need to see something to cleanse my mind of the last football game that I saw, which was not very good.
I think it probably would be a good exercise at some point to look and see how many times both teams would make it, the Ohio State and Michigan game. Like, how many times would both teams make a 12-team playoff, and does that really diminish the game? We'll get to the super chat from Jordan Kapler real quick, but I just want to mention I threw a poll on Twitter for both Ohio State and Michigan fans this week, and I asked Ohio State fans, what is more important to you, making the playoffs or beating Michigan? At this point, I bet you guys can imagine that 67% said beating Michigan is more important than making the playoffs. So 2/3 of the people still would view. Now, the timing of this might be specious, and there might be some bias there based on the recency of losing to Michigan. So yes, beating Michigan is more important. And of course, for Michigan fans, what is more important to you? 58% said making playoffs, 42% said beating Ohio State. So you beat Ohio State a couple times and it loses the luster there. I think if anything, dominating somebody creates more of an issue for a rivalry than playoffs. And I won't let you guys respond to that. I want to get to this Jordan Kapler super chat, and we'll just assume what I said is fact, and nobody can argue it. From Jordan Kapler, if you could shuffle teams around to play in other conference game championships, who would you move and to where? Example, Michigan plays TCU. Tom, what do you got?
Boy, I don't know that I would have USC favored to beat anyone from the other three that, the other three kind of playoff teams, and Ohio State only needs one of them to play. So I guess I'm going to go Georgia playing USC because I think Georgia would just whomp USC, and I think there's a decent possibility we find out that's true in about 29 days. But Michigan, boy, you put Michigan in against USC, and wouldn't that be real Machiavellian for Jim Harbaugh to we almost beat him, gang. Oh, so close. Oh, goodness. I think the best one for Ohio State would be Georgia playing USC, because that's the one where if USC loses, they're almost certainly out, and Georgia would have no reason to ease off the throttle. And then, Michigan, TCU, sure. I mean, TCU is an interesting team because they have been so close in so many games that I tweeted something out from someone who was, looking at like post-game win percentages, and like if you simulate their season with how they played against the teams that they played against, they are basically as likely to be 6-6 as they are 12-0, which is insane for a team that's 12-0. That's like 2002 Ohio State levels of, everything has to go exactly right. And Michigan against TCU, even a banged up Michigan team, I think probably handles TCU reasonably well. So those two I think would probably be games that would be beneficial to Ohio State. Let's leave it at that.
Kevin, wouldn't the real answer be USC versus TCU?
Yes. Been sitting here. I'm like, oh, pick me.
So if USC wins that game close, then congratulations. USC is number 3, and then TCU is number 4. So as usual, you're both wrong.
No, because here's the thing: everybody has got this major raging, over conference championship game participation. The CFP. The data point is winning your conference championship, not participating in the game. So I know ESPN has its, band of merry men and women going on and saying that, well, just being there is good enough for TCU. They get to play an extra game. And if they lose it, I mean, okay, 12 wins versus 11 wins, but not all wins are created equal. And I don't get it. I don't get the people that are saying that TCU with a 1-point loss or a 6-point loss or whatever is still fine being in there, just based on, isn't game control part of the metrics that people are supposed to be using, and the game control hasn't been there. So I'm just not buying it there. I think that the correct answer, along with Tony, which is a little frightening, is TCU and USC. That's the game I want to see. I want to see USC go against a team that has some defensive chops, and TCU is kind of routed into that here toward the end of the season, not so much earlier in the season. And I just want to see what that would end up netting. I mean, I could pick some fun, disgusting games, just throw Clemson in anything, and it's just going to muddy up the waters, because Clemson some way, somehow is representing the ACC digital. I don't even know what the divisions there are anymore.
They're more analog.
Yeah, I was going to say, give me UNC, a team, give me UNC USC. How about that? How about two teams that can't play a lick of defense? That would be fun. I mean, that first 1 to 100 wins there.
Tom, what is the over under on that? Is it 80? Is it 77.5? Like, it's going to be way up there.
It's in the mid to high 70s, I would say. And everything you guys are saying is exactly correct. If the committee had Ohio State 4th behind number 3 TCU and ahead of number 5 USC, If that's the case, then sure, absolutely. Then whoever loses falls behind Ohio State, and then they're still in the playoff. Ohio State's 5th. TCU is not falling 2 spots for a 1-point loss to number 4 USC in the big Pac-12. Boy, that's like Biggie Tupac. Oh boy, that would be a different kind of shootout. Yes, it is a. You're wrong, and that's okay. We still love you, but you're wrong. You would rather have. I really want to see USC play against TCU because they have a good defense. You know who else has a good defense? Georgia. You know who else is substantially better than TCU? Georgia. If you're looking for competitive, interesting games, sure, okay. But for an audience of Ohio State fans, I would assume they would much rather just see USC and TCU lose, in which case you should do my thing.
Shouldn't he? I forget what you said, Tom. Shouldn't it be then Georgia versus USC?
That's literally what I said. Yes.
But we don't listen generally. So
those playoff semifinals are not going to be close. Those are going to be lopsided wins for the top 2 seeds if that's how it shakes out, especially number 1 Georgia over number 4 USC. So yeah, and if you are a person who's hoping number 3 and number 4 lose this weekend, those are the matchups you should hope for.
We could just throw the Kansas City Chiefs in while we're at it too, or something like that.
Tommy's got a point. NFL into college football.
Who are the chefs?
So I want to touch on this from Peace Clan, and then I'll discuss another thing that I want to talk about. So here's my question. If USC wins and TCU loses, I know that creates a crap sandwich for the CFP committee, but how do they reconcile putting TCU in versus Ohio State? And this is something that I've been banging the drum on because, again, TCU, and I've heard it from I listen to Sirius XM in the mornings on a driving around, and they are banging the drum. They are banging the drum for TCU because of the fact that they're making it to the conference championship game. And as Kevin said, it's never really been a data point. Making it there is one thing, but as I said like a week ago, or not a week ago, a couple days ago when we were on one of the shows, like if they take TCU over Ohio State and a 1-loss TCU over Ohio State, they're doing that based on TCU beating a 4-8 Iowa State team, and they're saying that TCU's loss is better than Ohio State's loss. Now, if it's a 1-point loss, they'll have an argument. Ohio State lost by 22 points. It was a 1-score game with just over 7 minutes to play. It was not a blowout. I heard Dan Mullen on the radio this morning saying Michigan absolutely blew Ohio State out. It was not an absolute blowout. It was not a one-sided game. The committee is aware of how it ended and that fourth quarter. And so, yes, that is a stain for Ohio State, but it is 1 quarter of a 4-quarter game. And to then basically put TCU in because they beat an Iowa State team at 4-8, I think that to me is an issue. And I want to take you guys back to 2017 when Wisconsin was undefeated, ranked number 4, playing in the Big Ten championship game against Ohio State. Alabama, 11-1 at home. You hear people now talking about it's not fair for Ohio State to just be sitting at home and then earning a playoff bid. Alabama sat at home in 2017. Wisconsin lost by 6 points to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. Wisconsin fell out. Alabama moved in. Nobody said a single word that I can recall about how unfair it was, unless it was us.
Bama.
Yeah,
exactly.
Counterpoint. Roll Tide. Next question.
Well, fair point. But there was never any like, oh, Alabama's just sitting at home. It's not fair. I don't recall anybody saying Wisconsin should already be in. Well, and even speaking of it matter of factly, like people are doing with TCU, like TCU's already in. They're in regardless. Nobody said that with Wisconsin, and that was a close loss against an Ohio State team that had 2 losses at that point. But I'm sounding biased for Ohio State because I'm just speaking common sense about people who refuse to acknowledge that Ohio State still has a shot. And I get annoyed when I hear people talking about and writing about Alabama and Ohio State just both being lumped together right now. No, Alabama is out of the picture. To put Alabama and Ohio State in the same, it's like you're tying Ohio State to Alabama as you throw them both over the boat. And Ohio State's still in the boat. They're very much in the boat. they have a shot, and Alabama does not. And for people to continue to put Alabama in that same mention tells me that they don't really think TCU should be in, unless, of course, they're talking about comparing them to Alabama.
Well, this is one of these things where, because there's not an actual hard and fast criteria, this is not like the BCS where it was just like, here's the formula, and whoever comes out with this formula, like there's no wiggle room. It's all subjective, and then the criteria changes every year, and you have the SEC network people and the Big Ten network people and the CBS people and the Fox people all, just, it's nonsense politics spin, basically, where it's like, yes, well, but they have the best win. Well, but they have the worst loss. And oh boy, you can't possibly think, everyone treats everything as an absolute. You can't possibly think that a team that lost 45, 23, 22 points at home, you can't possibly, who could possibly put that team in? And it's like, well, okay, you can't possibly put a team in that, how could you possibly put them in over USC? Because USC only lost by 1 point. And even if USC loses again, how could you possibly yeah, okay, sure. I mean, you can come up with, an argument for just about anyone. You could put someone somewhere will say, if LSU beats Georgia, you can't possibly leave out a SEC conference champion because they're the best conference. And if you're the champion, you must be the best. And therefore, how could you possibly, someone will make that argument this weekend. And, this is because of the way the committee is set up. There are no hard and fast rules. So it just encourages this incredibly stupid discourse every single year about this stuff. And I have at various points thought about going back and put together like a Nick Saban supercut, but whatever, do it for whoever you want to, a Peter Burns supercut or Paul Feinbaum supercut or whoever, of just people arguing with themselves. Like, well, you got to look. I mean, they're the hottest team in the nation right now. You have to put them in. Oh man, they have the best win. You have to put them in. Look, you got to look at the game control. You have to put them in. And it's like, over the course of the 2014 through the present, people have argued for and against every possible combination of data points. So no one actually, believe it or not, no one actually believes anything, and they're all just sort of out for their own self-interest right now. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Kevin, before we get to that super chat, I want to mention your boy Chris Childers, like yesterday, saying
a man child. Don't let him call himself the show pony. It's the man child.
Ohio State,
whole story behind that.
Ohio State should be out of it, and people are ignoring teams like Alabama and Tennessee.
Yes, because Tennessee lost by 9,000 points to a 6-6. Do you remember? Do you remember back in 2000?
His quarterback had his leg fall off.
Do you remember back in 2017 and 18 when it was completely disqualifying for Ohio State to have lost to like middling Big Ten teams by 1,000 points? I bet you could find him saying the same thing about, well, I mean, come on. You lost to Purdue by 3 or 4 touchdowns. How could you possibly? Okay. They just gave up 9,000 points to a 6-6 South Carolina team. Like, cool.
Manchild lives in Tennessee. He wants to be able to walk up and down the streets, which means that he has to stump for there. He also knows that instant ratings are saying anything about Ohio State. So that's a business decision. I guarantee, I'll text him right now, and I guarantee if he answers at this point, which he probably would, he'll probably be like, oh, and that would be it. Whatever. I don't think Manchild believes what it is he's saying. I believe Dan Mullen does.
Let's get to that super chat from Brian Leger. Ryan Day turned OSU into a Big 12 team soft. And this narrative is now, it's going to continue that Ohio State is soft physically. It's Big 12. Meanwhile, as we said immediately after the game, it wasn't a physical letdown. It was a mental letdown. And to continue this label, we have to mention it because it's a super chat. So we're pretty much forced into this stuff. But calling Ohio State physically soft, I think, it's lazy.
Yeah, and you look at Donovan Edwards finished with 200 and whatever yards rushing. 160 of that, 170 of that came on 2 plays late in the game when Ohio State was essentially in, like when you used to play punt block to try and stop a 3rd and 1 kind of run. You're playing cover 0 and you rip off a couple long ones, like the Jonathan Wells 4th and 1 touchdown against Michigan in 2001. It's just, Michigan was not soft on that play. Michigan was just brought guys and had guys in a different spot. And Ohio State, if Ohio State was soft, why did Ohio State dominate Michigan's run game for like 2.5 quarters of that game, 3 quarters of that game? soft was not the issue. There were plenty of issues on Saturday. Ohio State being soft was not, was not one of them.
But it's disappointing, or just, I mean, I say it's disappointing to see that continue, but narratives continue all over the place, and facts don't change how people feel about anything anymore. Just looking at some of these.
Yeah, I've got a lot that I've been starring. I've not gotten to everything.
This one from
another super chat.
There you go.
You had to cover 0 to stop the run. That's doffed. I mean,
that's whack.
You are selling out to stop the run. I mean, they stopped the run the whole game. They were selling out to make sure they stopped the run in a 3rd and 1 kind of spot. That's not soft. Like, I'm very sorry. I will tell you what I have said to several people who have been extremely angry in my mentions this week. Anytime I mention even the possibility of Ohio State making the playoff, like, I'm very sorry you're mad, but you're wrong. Like, this is the equivalent of the people who are like, well, Ohio State doesn't deserve to be in the college football playoff. After they lost at home, it's like, okay, well, that's not the criteria that the college football playoff uses to determine it. So, okay, but I'm very sorry you're mad right now, but that doesn't mean you're right.
No, absolutely. Bicycle shop owner, one of these started to post here. I'm good with playing you guys in a natty, but give us USC or TCU in the semis. Again, Michigan fans are terrified of Ohio State. They're running scared. This is just another clear example.
They're the most vocal about about Ohio State not deserving. I mean, it's kind of like sitting there chanting overrated when you sit there and you beat a team higher rated. So you're just cheapening your win. So now you're going around, it's like, Ohio State, they're a piece of crap, blah, 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 blah. So you beat a piece of crap is what you're saying right there. And it wasn't really that big of a win.
Go ahead. I was thinking what would be a pretty hilarious turn of events here is, say USC loses, right? So they're out. TCU wins. Georgia loses. So then TCU goes to number 1, and Michigan wins or loses, whatever. So you have Georgia and Michigan at 2 and 3, and Ohio State playing TCU at 1 and 4.
Yeah, I mean, you would need Michigan losing for that to happen. I don't think there's any way that. I don't think. There's 2 things wrong with that. Number 1, Michigan is not losing to Purdue. Like, I'm very sorry, but Purdue's defense is not. This ain't it, Chief, is the phrase you're looking for when it comes to Purdue's defense.
How good does a defense need to be to contain Michigan to like 24 points when it's not Ohio State?
Better than they are. Purdue's offense is not that great. Purdue's passing offense on a yards per play basis is not very good. They put up a lot of yardage. They don't put up a lot of yards per play. That it's not going to work. Like, Ohio State fans, focus all of your rooting energy on Kansas State and Utah. Do not waste any time with Purdue. It ain't happening.
We'll see. Time is guaranteed it. So Buckeye fans, get excited about that Michigan Purdue game. Another super chat from Brian. PCU, Maryland, Michigan all scored 30 plus.
Isn't that where Ryan Reynolds went for like 17 years? Was he in that movie?
PCU? No, that was Jeremy Piven.
Oh, yeah. I don't know. That movie sucked.
You bite your tongue.
Yeah. I mean, Penn State scored 31. Well, Maryland didn't score 30. I mean, they scored 30. They didn't go over 30. But yeah, I mean, what's the question? I mean,
well, yeah, it's the same person, so I'm assuming it's all soft, and it's like softness is whatever I determine it means to be. Like, Penn State scored a bunch of points on a lot of teams. Penn State's the 7th, 8th ranked team in the country this year. I mean, okay, I'm sorry you're mad, but teams are allowed to give up 30 points. That is a thing that happens sometimes.
I mean, Maryland scored 27 on Michigan. I mean, that makes that the delineation between soft and hard is 3 points there.
And 2 of them came on a blocked PAT that got run back. So, okay, was that softness that caused the PAT to be blocked and run back? I mean, maybe, but probably not.
What else we got here? I think from Classic Country Revival, I think if TCU loses, the committee may look at Michigan's performance. If they look absolutely dominant against Purdue, that would help OSU's resume. If Michigan scrapes by or gets upset, not so much.
I think we know what Michigan is. I don't think that the Purdue game is going to really have that huge of a bearing on anything. Now, if Michigan comes out and looks sloppy, remember this is week 1 of them fully announcing and acknowledging that there's no Blake Corum.
Mm-hmm.
So
the timing of that, Tom, we'll get to that. Sorry, Kevin.
well, the timing is something else that's much more questionable. But so it's. I don't think that there's going to be a situation of where the committee is going to be like, oh, didn't know that Michigan's pretty good this year. It really took this Purdue game to show it to us. So, I think it's an interesting talking point, but I don't know if I'm fully on board with that.
Well, I think Michigan blowing out Purdue does not hurt Ohio State at all. Michigan losing close does, but does it hurt them enough? I think the TCU Ohio State argument has already been decided. We just don't know how it's been decided at this point. I think the committee already, and honestly, Ohio State has been 2 spots ahead of TCU every single week that the ratings have been announced, at least 2 spots ahead until the loss. So Ohio State has been clearly ahead of TCU until TCU beat Iowa State and Ohio State lost to Michigan. So I think once you match them up again, Ohio State, why wouldn't they be at least a spot ahead of TCU? Joshua Smith, Super Chat. CJ is elite when things are easy, but crumbles when his team is struggling. He doesn't raise a play around him, but relies on the talent around him to hold up. I put together some stats a while back, and this would have been October, November, about him completing like 80 to 90% of his passes in a handful of games where Ohio State was down in the fourth quarter or tied in the fourth quarter, and his numbers are fantastic. But there is, and I think it's undeniable that this season we did not see. You don't see JT Barrett, and I'm not saying JT Barrett throwing the ball, and JT Barrett fell short, but the level of leadership or just put it on my shoulders, a level of exuberance, that sort of thing that you expect from a quarterback, or that is the romanticized version of the quarterback leader that you see in the movies or that you see in some games where it's like I'm going to make this happen. I'm going to will this. Like there's no willing, and in fact there's some unwillingness, it seems at times. And watching that the first interception on the field against Michigan, and I think it was just Luke Whippler just dropped to his knees and was like, just shook his head, like you did one of these things, and it reminded me of the Oregon game where you just weren't convinced that CJ Stroud was going to get this done. And I don't know if that's fair to him, if that's just people reading too much into his demeanor. But the meme about that you see on the Twitter of the X-ray with the dog, and this guy has a dog in him. I don't know if I've ever seen that meme related to CJ Stroud.
Well, you go back to last year's Rose Bowl, and he, came back and won. They were down 17 points or something in the first half of that game, and came back and won, and had to deal with getting just an absolute body blow the other direction where it's, you had the kickoff that got run back for a touchdown and 2 guys are hurt on the play. And I mean, just stuff, where you had your back against the wall. And this year against Penn State, he had his back against the wall. They're down with 7-8 minutes left to go and came back and answered in 3 plays, bing, bang, boom, right down the field. And you score a touchdown. CJ Stroud is not going to go down as the single greatest quarterback in Ohio State history. And I think, you can do the whole body language thing on him, and he, his shoulders are slump at times, but he has also, pulled them out from behind in the past as well. I don't think I put that game really on CJ Stroud, the Michigan game. CJ Stroud did not give up the long passing touchdowns to Michigan. CJ Stroud did not give up the long rushing touchdowns at the end of Michigan. Frankly, I think if they don't give up the 2 long rushing touchdowns at the end of Michigan, Ohio State's probably 4 and maybe even comfortably 4. And, if they lose that game by 8 points instead of 22 points, I think you're having a whole different conversation, which, then kind of raises the question of how stupid it is to really decide a team's entire fate around 2 plays in the last 8 minutes of a game and all that kind of stuff, and to treat the Tennessee-Georgia game the same way as the Ohio State-Michigan game, which were 2 very different games in terms of how they played out. But I don't think you can really put it all on CJ Stroud. I think there are play calling issues that have been broken down a whole bunch this week, and not going to Marvin Harrison once in the red zone. Like, some of that is probably on CJ Stroud, but some of that is also on play design, and some of that is also just probably you can just say, like, throw it to Marvin on this play. Like, and there is an argument you should probably be doing that because he's a Martian and he does stuff that no one else can do. And like, oh no, Marvin Harrison's covered tightly. Like, I think you'd rather throw it into Marvin Harrison in 30% tighter coverage than some of Ohio State's other receivers in 30% looser coverage where there's still coverage there.
Martian Harrison Jr.
It's not the worst thing you've ever said.
Marvin the Martian.
Brian, another super chat. I'm going to assume this says JJ has that dog, CJ doesn't, or JJ is that dog and CJ isn't. I mean, give CJ Stroud some of that coverage, and he is going to look like a 900-pound Rottweiler. I promise you that. Brian, another super chat. CJ strikes a pose after a touchdown. JJ tells his team not to get too high. There are levels to this, as I'm gonna assume that's what that is talking about. If you want to parse every little thing, like, JJ is one of the cockiest, most confident guys, and we talked about that. That's a good thing for him to be that confident. And you saw him on the sideline plenty, being very confident and boisterous to the crowd. And so it's not that JJ is too calm and CJ Stroud is too excitable. I'd say it's that is the opposite of those two guys.
JJ McCarthy will lose another game at some point during his college career, and when that happens, confidence then becomes, he's cocky, he's got, he's arrogant, he's not a grinder, and it's all stuff. It's all just like post hoc nonsense. And JJ McCarthy going up the tunnel before the game and taunting Ohio State fans. Guess what he looked like in the first half of that game, outside of like 2 throws, just like warmed over crap. And did he win the game in the end? Yes. How did the taunting Ohio State fans look 15 minutes into that game, 20 minutes in that game, when Ohio State was up and Michigan couldn't get anything going? And, I don't think JJ McCarthy's confidence had anything to do with Cam Brown failing to shove a guy out of bounds. Like, you can chalk that all to, look at the 70-yard touchdown JJ McCarthy threw. Like, okay, that's fine. But there was stuff. A lot of things went right for JJ McCarthy, and a lot of that was stuff that he did, but there was a bunch of stuff that was out of his control that went just fine for JJ McCarthy. If Michigan loses to Georgia 31-10 again this year in the national championship game, JJ McCarthy's swagger and arrogance and, confidence and whatever you want to call it, like, then it's going to be a bad thing. And look at the entitlement in this young man and blah, blah, blah.
I tend to measure quarterbacks by completion percentage, and JJ McCarthy 50% in that game, CJ Stroud 64.6. So I think that's irrefutable. Texas,
I measure him by height.
Again, CJ Stroud 6'3", JJ McCarthy barely there at 6'2". I don't see any other way to decide that. Texas or busted comment here. Since the Big Ten is likely moving to no divisions, should the game be moving up a few weeks on the calendar just to keep its significance?
No.
That to me is a tipping point. That's when you say, okay, it's time to diminish the importance of this game. And then it just becomes not like any other game, but it becomes closer to another game by moving. I don't think you need to move it. Play 2 weeks in a row. See if I care. I'm totally fine with that. I don't think that takes away the because, again, nobody wants to lose it. Look at the criticism that Ryan Day has received, and not that he's scrolling on Twitter crying like maybe Lane Kiffin would be, but I would be. I don't. We don't even know how we would be reacting to having a second game, a second Ohio State Michigan game 1 week later. So people already like poo-pooing it or saying we don't need it. Like, I don't know that that's the case. I think this would be a pretty big game if it was Ohio State in Indianapolis instead of Purdue.
Yeah, and just like it would be a pretty big game in a college football playoff semifinal or national championship game if it was Ohio State Michigan. Like all the people who are telling you it'll never matter again. Like, okay, I mean, there have been a lot of very overwrought reactions over the last week on any number of subjects. If Ohio State and Michigan play in the final game of the regular season, how many of the past whatever since they went to divisions of the past 10 years, how many years would Ohio State and Michigan have played in the Big Ten championship game? Let's add in USC, let's add in UCLA to this whole mix, and then you're going to have a balanced schedule. So now who knows who you're playing, and if who are you going to have Ohio State play in the final week to guarantee they're not going to have a rematch? Like, let's put them against the worst team in the Big Ten this year. That's Northwestern. Okay, great. So they only would have had rematches in 2018 and 2020 1 week later. Like, this is how it is. Putting teams in divisions right now, you're creating all sorts of I think you're creating all sorts of really lopsided garbage under the current setup, where it's just like, oh, look, Iowa's losing 42-3. Oh, look, Purdue's about to lose 42-17. Like, that game is non-competitive an awful lot. The Big Ten West has quite literally never won the game, so it's kind of pointless right now. Frankly, I think there's a much better argument to just get rid of the Big Ten championship game than to shuffle a bunch of stuff around to try and ensure that it's not a rematch of two teams the week before.
Kevin, the playoffs being expanded, being announced, I think it's listed as the top six, the six highest ranked conference champions. I wonder if we do eventually see the conference championship games go away, because we've had conference champions forever without conference championship games being played. I think there's enough money to make that happen, but you're going to be losing money that you could have had should you get rid of those conference championship games. Do you see those sticking around? Do you think they stay?
There's too much money to be made. I mean, okay, you can sit there and say, well, the new TV deals and everything else, but we want our cake. We want to have our cake and eat it too. So we're also going to play the conference championship game and have that and create all these other, I think that conference championship games are, I want to keep our nice rating. I'm not going to say any of the bad sayings that I would say that they're worthless. I don't care for them. I don't like them, especially going into where we're at now. Now, obviously, there was a different day and age in 2014. Ohio State absolutely had to win its championship game against Wisconsin to move up, but I've never really been a big fan of the conference championship games, other than the fact that it guaranteed me a chance to go and have steak at St. Elmo and some drinks at Kilroy's and everything else. And I love Indianapolis, but they're not going to get rid of them. They're not going to get rid of them unless there is a breakaway in Division I NC2A where you go to 2 super conferences, 3 super conferences, whatever. They get their own media rights deal, and part of the deal is there is not going to be a conference championship level per se, that it's going to all be baked into the playoffs.
You preferred the scenario where, like in 2005, Ohio State loses to Penn State and they get to share a Big Ten championship with Penn State. You, sir,
sharing is caring. Sharing is caring.
A fraud and a coward.
I was going to say my first grade teacher, Mrs. Delcamp, taught me that. Sharing is caring.
So in this world, do tiebreakers not exist anymore? Because it feels like 2005, Penn State and Ohio State both would have made the 12-team college football playoff, and there is some tiebreaker procedure. And okay, that team gets to be the top 4 seed and get the bye, and then okay, I mean,
well, it's just the 6 highest ranked conference champions. So like it would be Penn State at that point, I assume, because Ohio State would have had 2 losses that year.
Mm-hmm. Well, in 2005, yeah, but what were they coming into the bowls? They were, because they lost 2005, they lost to Penn State. Didn't they just lose to Penn State?
Texas.
Oh, they lost to Texas too. Yeah, it's a 3-point home loss to Penn State, and you have 2 losses to teams that are in the top 5, 4 at that point. I mean, that's an Ohio State team that's probably like a 7 seed.
Oh yeah,
I mean, so you're hosting number 10 whoever, and you maybe number 10 Notre Dame, and you beat them by 3 touchdowns, and then you move on. And yeah, that's one of those things where if your gripe is that you've lost 2 games and therefore you might not get to be the Big Ten champion and get the auto bid, like okay, sure. I mean, that's fine, but that's as far as gripes go, that's not a particularly great one.
No, what I would like to see when the Big Ten goes to 18 or perhaps 20, and you break into pods, and you're going to keep the conference championship game. Why not also have conference semifinals and have a dynamic last couple of weeks of the season where remember the original schedule for the championship week schedule for COVID, and we all thought this is fantastic, and I think you can do that again. And you don't know, going into the season, you don't know who you're going to be playing, that semifinal week. Gene Smith said back in like August that moving forward, you're not going to know who you're playing until like 10 months before, basically, the year before. Whereas before it's like a 3-year stretch of games that they announce. Now it's just going to be 1 year because, with no divisions or perhaps I haven't really heard them talking about pods or however you want to categorize those things. But I don't expect it to happen in terms of having a semifinal weekend. I just think if you want money, there's a Final Four of Big Ten play. I'm surprised we have not heard more talk about something like that, having a dynamic week where we know it's possible, but because we saw it in 2020 or almost saw it in 2020. I think we did end up seeing it in 2020, but the fan experience in the hotels weren't an issue. But I don't think that needs to be a reason it stops. I would like to, maybe if I continue and then you guys latch on to me and to my coattails and continue to push this idea, maybe we could see it. Am I the only one who wants to see Big Ten semifinals?
Well, I think that would be a great opportunity for some really interesting kind of bracket buster type matchups towards the end of the season. I think the crucial thing there would be, can you get every conference to sign on for that? Because if the Big Ten's doing that, and the SEC and the Big 12 and the ACC and the Pac-12 aren't doing it, then the Big Ten's putting itself at something of a disadvantage. If you can get everyone to agree on it, yeah, that would be tremendous. It is something you absolutely could do, but logistically, this is one of the things where you could do it, but it makes everyone's job harder, so therefore they're not ever going to do it. So, yeah, right. I mean, it's just. It's like, okay, well, if it involves more money, yes, we'll do it, and it doesn't matter if unless it means more work, in which case, no, that doesn't, yeah, I'm sure it would be very difficult. You could also figure it out 3 weeks in advance and just kind of go, hey, Ohio State and Michigan, you are, here's the standings. Look, you're at the top
play early. You need to finish your pod play early, so then you kind of know what it would look like.
I doubt they're going to like pods, because pods is, here are the 4 teams and it's just a round robin of you 4. I think they're going to have protected rivals, because if you go back and try and do it in pods, you're going to have a bunch of stuff that's like, this doesn't work. You're missing these crucial rivalries. I don't think it's going to be true pods where it's like, Northwestern, the Great Lakes pod champion of 2027. Like, I don't think you're going to have that kind of thing. It'll just be sort of, you have 3 protected rivals. Everyone has 3 protected rivals. And, they just because someone is your protected rival doesn't mean that they're going to be the protected rival of someone else who is your protected rival.
Yeah. Like the pods won't necessarily be like Ohio State may be in Maryland's pod, but I think there's going to be some dynamic things to it. But again, yeah, everybody would need to be on board, and there's no way the SEC is getting on board with that. And I also do think that Kevin would perhaps even take more away from Ohio State, Michigan. If now there's another game after Ohio State, Michigan that is of great importance.
Yeah, but again, that's, you're dancing with the devil of how the playoff is working, and you're going to have several rounds in the playoff now. So, I mean, it's like, okay, do people really shut off and say, well, Michigan was the end of the regular season, but then you still have a conference championship game, hell, a conference a semifinal game, and then a championship game, and then 3 rounds in the playoffs or whatever. I mean, you're going to sit there and it's going to get to the point of where Michigan is going to be the halfway point of the football playing season, because you're going to have so many games on the back end of it all.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. And I'll go ahead and table my argument for quarterfinals so that we can move on, because that might even be less popular. But from Henry, California, Utah will beat USC. USC has no defense. You do not want it to come down to TCU, Ohio State. USC will lose. Ohio State can beat Georgia. No pass rush. Keely Ringo will be a safety in the NFL. Now, I do agree that if Ohio State fans could root for one team to lose or can guarantee one team to lose, it would. You want USC to lose over TCU losing, because then Ohio State is in. TCU, then you're still waiting on Sunday to see exactly what happens. Is there any scenario, Tom, where USC loses and Ohio State is not in?
I can't think of one, because if you look at any kind of advanced metrics at all, USC really doesn't belong ahead of Ohio State now, which that's still baffling to me, why USC is ahead of Ohio State right now. Because if USC is behind, USC should be number 5 behind Ohio State. And then if USC wins, you can bump them up ahead of Ohio State. And I would love to know the thinking, because I don't think the thinking went anywhere past, well, Ohio State lost by 22 points and USC only lost by 1 point, so therefore USC is better. And it's like, okay, that's the one metric where that's true. I was baffled by that on Tuesday, but no, I can't really imagine USC losing to Utah and Ohio State not jumping over them. But I don't think there's any rational argument for that to happen. But I don't think there's any rational argument for the USC to really be ranked ahead of Ohio State right now. So who knows?
Yeah,
also
but if USC loses, then you just drop them. I mean, I'm just devil's advocate there. I agree with Tom that USC should have been 5, but I guess they're doing exactly what they say they're trying not to do, and that's forecasting and looking ahead or whatever. And honestly, there's no reason necessarily to be looking at an upcoming game with Utah when you're ripping up the sheet and it's supposed to be the sheet for that week, and it didn't really make a lot of sense.
Let's go ahead and maybe spend the rest of the show on this comment question from Matt. Is the rumor true that Ohio State requested to not be selected for the Rose Bowl? And so, talking with somebody from Ohio State on Tuesday, there was the thought that OSU would tell the Rose Bowl, hey, you know what? We would never say no, but please don't make us say no. And if you'd prefer to have Penn State be happy to go, that would be great, because right now the interest from the fan base and even from perhaps the program itself isn't there for the Rose Bowl 2 years in a row. And so please go ahead and select Penn State, and they would be thrilled with that. And you hear that, and there are so many different ways and tangents you can go. Ohio State basically turning down the Rose Bowl, saying, we don't want it, don't need it. It's not something that we're interested in. I think it's 100% based on the fact, or 50% based on the fact that they were just there last year, 50% based on the fact that they lost to Michigan. So the interest is down for anything after you lose to Michigan, especially in immediate aftermath. So I think those are the two obvious reasons. And so, yeah, it is from what I was told, it's definitely true. And Tom, I know you have no particular opinion on this.
Yes, as far as the greatest venue in college football versus a cement thing in a cement rectangle in the middle of a parking lot in Hollywood, Florida. Yes, very much the same thing to me. Could be either one, is fine. I think it's bizarre that Ohio State has chosen to like self-impose the no repeat rule for some reason. Like, and let's be super, super clear. Ohio State is, concerned about this because they're worried about losing money on having to, not sell their ticket allotment or whatever. That's the reason. And I just, that to me is, in a time when college football and there's concern about college, getting away from college football traditions and, the things that made college football great, just giving the, no, we have Rose Bowl at home. We don't need that. Like that to me is like beyond the pale, but whatever. Everyone's going to do whatever they're going to do. So yeah, if it's Clemson in the Orange Bowl, like that's fine. We'll go down and cover that game and it'll be fine and whatever. But that to me is, it's people in charge of the program who did not grow up as part of, being part of the program is kind of what that is to me.
Kevin, your thoughts?
Yeah, I have a hard time with it. I understand the methodology and everything else, the reasoning of fans are not exactly all that jazzed about it. As somebody said, $800 flights. I'd like to see where you're getting an $800 flights closer to $1,000, I think. Just there last year. I mean, all the opt-outs. We're now in the era of the opt-outs. I mean, how many people? I mean, that's a long way and a lot of money to spend to go see, kind of a preview of the 23 team in terms of a lot of positions as you see certain players not go. I don't know. I just don't know how much excitement. The thing is, when this first started coming out, people had come up with this fanciful idea that it was going to be Ohio State, Alabama in the Orange Bowl, but the ACC has a tie-in there. That's where their champ goes unless they go to the college football playoff. And the only way Clemson is going to the college football playoff is with a ticket. So unless you get really some weird dispensation there, and I don't know why Clemson would be like, well, we're game. We'll go out to the Cotton to go play nobody. I just don't know how you'd make that work. So it's Clemson. Ohio State fans can't beat Clemson enough. I get that. I understand it's not necessarily been a common occurrence, but to get a 2-game winning streak over them would be great for Ohio State fans and build some momentum going into the season. But I don't know. This all used to be about going to the Rose Bowl. That was the end all be all. That was the prize. That was the grand prize. And to have an opportunity to do that and just saying, nah, we're good, just feels a little foreign to me.
I just, while you were talking, just looked up. You want to guess what flights from Columbus to Fort Lauderdale on Southwest cost on the 28th and the 31st, going 2 days before the game and coming back the day after?
About the
round
same.
trip.
700.
Yeah, about $1,100. So congratulations. Like, okay, cool. So you get to go to Miami instead of
cool. Hook 'em.
Yeah, to me, it's just kind of whatever. I mean, like there are many things to question at the moment, and that is certainly one of them.
Well, Tom, you are in favor of all of this NIL stuff. You are in favor of the transfer portal. You are now seeing what you have sown. You have to now reap it and take it and accept it. And I blame you. I blame you, Tom. I honestly do. But also talking with somebody in the Clemson sphere, they aren't so convinced that the Tigers are going to beat North Carolina. So that Ohio State, North Carolina in the Orange Bowl.
I don't know if I want to see Drake May throwing all over these guys.
Well, Drake May, does Drake May, is it like when Cuban players would come to the U.S. for like the Pan Am games, and is Drake May going to try and hide in the wheel well of the Ohio State team playing and going home? Please
He's going to hide in
a
DeJuan Jones jersey. They'll never find him.
Yeah, I mean,
DeJuan's not playing.
That.
But
I mean,
they'll still have one. They'll still have one around, and he'll just wrap himself up like where they would in like the mob movies where they would have the rug and they would put the body in the rug. He's just going to roll himself up in a DeJuan Jones jersey.
I just want to clarify. I don't know for sure that DeJuan Jones is not playing, so don't run with that. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, it is. It'll be interesting to see if. I mean, that would be certainly bet the over. Is I think my analysis on the potential Ohio State North Carolina game. Bet the over, but it would be it would be an entertaining game. I don't know if it'd be a good game, but it would be an entertaining game.
The last thing, and I also will want to. I just want to say, Tennessee got blown out by Georgia. Nobody said they should be eliminated until they lost their second game. Nobody had an issue with Tennessee making the playoffs until they lost their second game. And so I just want to throw out there because I didn't get a chance to say that earlier. This from Justin Courtney. Could you three please comment on how you would feel to watch Michigan win a national championship with all the aspirations Ohio State fans had at the beginning of the year? I think it would be fantastic for the Big Ten if somebody other than Ohio State won a playoff game, won a national championship. It has been other than Ohio State. When was the last time a Big Ten team won an entire national championship? Was it been Ohio State in like 1968? Like, prior to Ohio State winning a full, when was the last non-Ohio State full national championship team?
Well, I mean, actual team in the Big Ten, because Nebraska won a bunch in the 90s and Penn State won in 1986, but actual team in the Big Ten to win.
While a member of the Big Ten.
Never did it.
Michigan State in 1966, I think. And I don't know if that was an outright national championship. I feel like they might. I think they
Don't
won
give me this UPI crap.
I think they won 2, and one of them might have been a consensus, and one of them was a split. But I mean, yeah, you're getting back to Marshall Plan days pretty quickly there, because Michigan hasn't won an outright one since 47, 48, something like that. 47
in 66. The AP gave theirs to Notre Dame. Michigan and multiple other outlets, including UPI, NFF, but like NFF split at National Football Foundation. Michigan State had CFRA, whatever that is, HAF, NFF, and PS. So none of those are necessarily any of the major organizations.
Market X saying Minnesota in 1960.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I mean,
Yeah,
so
that was API and UPI gave it to them in 60. There are others that claim it because that's how it was in the bowl era, and fantastic. Everybody gets a national championship, but yeah.
Yeah, and I see people mentioning Michigan in 1997. That was a split national championship.
That was a half
split. So we're talking like undisputed national champs. You've got to go 60 some years to find a non-Ohio State team. I mean, yeah, Michigan winning the Big Ten would be fantastic or winning the national championship would be fantastic for the Big Ten.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else, guys, before we get out of here? I think we've gone an hour. I know people want to get to their lunch, including Tom and Kevin.
Not Tony. He doesn't eat food. Just a paste, just a slurry.
Like RoboCop.
Paste.
All right, that will do it. I want to thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for the super chats. Thank you for loading us up with questions. And sorry we didn't get to all of them. But you know what? There will be other Fridays. I assume. Let's hope. Knock wood. Other Fridays.
Big if true.
Yes.
And then
you may see one or more of us on at some point this weekend if a game goes the right way or something. We'll see.
Mm-hmm. There may be. Yes.
I may even have a beer or two in me.
Some of the hypotheticals there are more hypothetical than others, is what I'm thinking.
But it's going to be a fantastic weekend. Even if things don't go your way, remember, you might get to see Ohio State, North Carolina in the Orange Bowl. So thank you all for joining us, and we will talk to you guys later.